Beckn is a very generic global protocol. It needs to be adapted for a certain context, and that's what ONDC did. So ONDC has the base as the Beckn Protocol, and they have added on top of it very India network specific elements to that.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Indianaut podcast, where we interview some of India's next best analytical and creative minds who are not only revolutionizing their own field, but at the same time transforming India's entrepreneurial ecosystem one step at a time.
Our guest for the day is the CEO and co-founder of FIDE, the Foundation for Interoperability in Digital Economy. FIDE is a not-for-profit organization that is the genesis author and angel donor to the Beckn Protocol. Our guest was instrumental in the setup of ONDC in December 2021 and co-authored the ONDC Strategy Paper. Before launching FIDE, along with Nandan Nilekani and Dr. Pramod Varma, he headed management consulting practices and internet businesses in urban mobility and digital payments. We have with us Sujith Nair. Let us jump right into the conversation. Hey Sujith, I hope you're all settled in.
Yeah, thank you, Gautam. All well, all settled in. Thank you for having me.
Excellent, Sujith. So let's get started, Sujith. So before working on the Beckn Protocol, you were a part of EY for almost 11 years. So in your own words, how did you and your peers identify the opportunity that led to the birth of Beckn? How does your work at EY relate to this?
So my tryst with something like an idea of Beckn sort of much earlier during my stint at EY, roughly at the later half of my stint there. I was lucky enough to be part of the Aadhar project, one of the first few consultants to literally airdropped into that project to solve for getting the biometric systems in place and some of the other large scale infrastructure and service providers like managed service providers that Aadhar recruited. So I think my exposure to a new form of thinking originated with Aadhar, the idea that a very simple, lightweight infrastructure, enabling infrastructure with a population scale agenda is something that was very fascinating. My perspective on how technology in business transformation or transformation of creating large scale reforms, I think that whole perspective sort of changed completely. And I think that sort of mindset remained more or less as a template for me in things that I did. Soon after Aadhar, which was roughly between the stint at Aadhar was between 2010 and 12. Soon after Aadhar, I kind of took some of these ingredients and looked at another problem, the problem of mobility, integrated mobility, the whole transport system. And I looked at it's a problem that we all face across the world. And every city, we see that mobility is a big societal problem. So is there a way we can bring the different forms of mobility together and make them kind of answer the fundamental question for a customer about how do I go from point A to point B and make it more purpose and customer centric rather than form centric. But my methods at that time was the route I took then was to sort of solve it through the form of open payments. So I don't think any other country at that time other than UK and specifically only London was bringing this whole contactless EMV, open EMV based standards to sort of bring transit systems, open up their whole ticketing, fare collection, journey booking platforms to have a more interoperable standards like the EMV card specifications. And I realized that that's a great opportunity. And I had an opportunity to sort of dabble with that kind of form of technology with another project outside in India. This is for a football league in Turkey. But I thought that idea could be very relevant for mobility even in India. So as much as London was doing it with their buses and the underground metro, we started off that conversation in Bangalore with the BMTC, which is the state city bus corporation here. And then we took it in a bigger way with Kochi Metro, and the Kochi Metro was just coming up.
Right.
And that led to sort of several such, transport agencies coming forward and saying, oh, this is not just about integration, but it also kind of gives a larger appeal for market expansion because I can get more people to adopt transit systems if I can solve for the first mile, last mile access. So that sort of ushered sort of sowed the seeds for the larger idea of Beckn in some sense, although I didn't see that as in the natural sort of an extension of what I was doing. But I think those were some of the inspiring moments while I was at EY. Right. One is the Aadhar, and then this whole transit open payment system to bring mobility ecosystem together. So that's kind of the things that I very fondly remember of my time at EY.
Right. That sounds great, Sujit. And I think in India, this digital public goods ecosystem, I think that kickstarted with Aadhar only. Aadhar is the mother of all all such projects and all such innovations that have taken place after that. I think that
That's
would be
right.
a correct statement, right? Right.
Yep. No, in
Excellent. So,
fact, absolutely. I think this sort of new template started with Aadhar. Not that there were no DPGs across the world, but yeah, India's true recognition of this template and therefore doubling up on it and building more and more on that sort of took off from Aadhar, undoubtedly. Yeah.
definitely. Sujit, so before we, proceed ahead with the rest of the show, for our viewers, can you tell us the difference between the Beckn Protocol, ONDC, and your organization FIDE?
Great. I get this question often, and I find it incredibly important to sort of keep clarifying. So
Right.
let me do in the following way. I'll explain what protocol is, the Beckn Protocol, separate that from FIDE, which is a company that I represent, and then talk about ONDC. So Beckn Protocol, as any protocol, any tech protocol, is just a bunch of specifications. It's not some kind of a software or a runtime infrastructure or a platform in any sense. It's just a vocabulary that has been put together to make any two computers on the cloud understand the concept of an economic transaction. I think today you have, like, the internet works on a stack of protocols. You have TCP/IP, which makes two computers talk to each other and send information packets. HTTP as a layer on top of that sort of made hypertext documentation interoperable, so you can figure out content by looking at some of these HTML pages. But I think where HTTP stops is to semantically understand the pages in the sense that it cannot differentiate between, let's say, a shopping site and a banking site. You just know that it's a
Right.
web page that I can access, and protocol enables that, the HTTP. What Beckn does, just as a kind of a minor extension, is to make the two machines semantically understand that you can actually make them do economic transactions. For example, I can search for grocery or a ride or a doctor online, and the machine itself can understand the catalog of services of the service provider online and get into a transaction like we humans do with our online shopping, like add an item to the cart or search first, add an item to the cart and place an order, track for the order's fulfillment, and post fulfillment, like give rating or do cancellation, things like that. So creating that economic order lifecycle transaction vocabulary is what Beckn Protocol does. It's a bunch of specification with some data elements, data structure defined as a common vocabulary for every platform to sort of agree on and use. It's not that that vocabulary doesn't exist, but this vocabulary is currently proprietary and closed. The way the vocabulary gets implemented by Amazon is different from that of an Uber or a Flipkart or any other. So the idea was to create open and a common set of specifications that everybody can use, because that allows everybody to interact freely without having to know somebody else's language for me to speak in that language. So protocol
Right.
just does that. So this was an effort that was started by the foundation that I represent here, FIDE. FIDE actually stands for the Foundation for Interoperability in Digital Economy. We were previously Beckn Foundation, and we took that name after we put a name of Beckn to the protocol. But as a foundation, we thought of coming together between Nandan, Pramod, and I to set up this not-for-profit venture, FIDE, and sort of only build standards and probably advocate on standards and the need for interoperability if the digital economy were to grow and cater to everybody's interest and not the interest of few people. So Beckn Protocol was sort of the invention by FIDE, but it was only, we were the sort of the initial authors of this protocol, but it's no more just dependent on FIDE as an organization, because what we have done is, right from the early days, after the first version of the specifications were out, we sort of made it open source, obviously, and we made a whole community come together. An open source community of volunteers, companies, entrepreneurs who think that this idea could potentially be powerful at some point, have come together, and they have been co-authoring this specification and contributing to its evolution. So today, FIDE is just a not-for-profit organization that is one of the many volunteers of the Beckn
Right.
Protocol, and this is more like a little donor sort of being a donor to the evolution of the protocol, like any other organization who wants to do that. And that's where FIDE
Right.
is. And FIDE as such does not offer any services. It's not in the business of doing commerce or retail or anything. We don't participate in the implementations of the protocol itself. We are just more of the protocol advocates and advisors and co-authors, of course. So we are not. You don't see us as a service provider or a network participant on any of the networks like ONDC. That brings us to ONDC. Now, ONDC is both it's a network. It is an idea where the protocol, which is a bunch of specifications, Beckn Protocol, when you implement the protocol, you have a network coming up. Because your protocol essentially means two separate platforms talking to each other. So even if you have two platforms coming together, it's essentially a network, right? Where the same is the case with HTTP or even the email protocol like SMTP. Now, ONDC is fundamentally a network, and again, it's not a platform or a software where you can have multiple platforms or businesses from the market adopt this protocol, the Beckn Protocol, and talk to each other. So ONDC is a network that implements the protocol, and the network essentially means the participating platforms implementing the Beckn Protocol. However, ONDC has taken the open source Beckn Protocol and adapted it to a more contextual kind of a implementation to allow for various use cases specific to India. Beckn is a very generic global protocol. It needs to be adapted for a certain context, and that's what ONDC is. So ONDC has the base as the Beckn Protocol, and they have added on top of it very India network specific elements to that. And therefore, it's collectively called the ONDC protocol. So think of ONDC protocol having two layers, where the base layer is Beckn, and they've added a layer of other specifications to adapt the network for sort of the Indian kind of context and regulations and all that. So that's what ONDC is. Incidentally, the network is put together or orchestrated by the company which is called ONDC2. So the company name and the network name both are the same, ONDC, and the company is of course ONDC Limited. Another Section 8 company, not-for-profit setup, with participation from Government of India, which of course they have been kind of literally be the guiding light in setting up this, but they are not the sole sort of promoters of this. There's one of the many shareholders in this entity. It's a market-facing entity with many public and private companies as the shareholders of ONDC. It has its own team now, and their job is to implement this network and expand this network using the underlying protocol. Yeah, so those are the three different things that I thought I should clarify. I hope I did a decent job with that.
No, I think you did a wonderful job with that. So if I were to just summarize it as a one-liner, right? So the way it is that say for example, the ONDC is an enabling layer built on top of the Beckn protocol specifically for the India use case, right? And ONDC as an entity is owned by a combination of banks and other regulatory bodies, as well as has stakeholdership from the government. And Beckn is global in nature. It can be adapted to other countries as well, other use cases as well, or not just say, for example, e-commerce. And FIDE is basically an organization which promotes the Beckn protocol towards its adoption to other use cases and other countries. So that I think that's but your explanation of the entire concept was absolutely wonderful, and it really does clarify where things stand and where things go, basically. So let's now
thank you, and you put it very succinctly. Thank you for that.
Right, thank you for that. So Sujith, let's jump gears now, okay, and let's focus on the ONDC protocol itself, okay. So ONDC has entered a pilot phase essentially with close to 4,000 successful transactions being completed in the month of January 2023, right? How has the journey been so far, and what are your predictions for ONDC in 2023?
Great. I think the journey has been fantastic in the sense that the fact that the company ONDC as a company just got incorporated on December 31st of 2021, and within a matter of few weeks, it was able to sort of get a significant attention from the market, of course, media and everyone, to sort of kind of help us familiarize this very counterintuitive idea of a decentralized network, which is not something that,
Right.
for everything, if it's something online, it has to be a platform of some sort. It cannot be like, how can I be asking something to the network? It's always a platform. The idea of a network and not a platform, I think that familiarization was, I think, fairly rapid. Of course, there is still a little bit of that confusion in the larger segment, but I think among the entrepreneurs, the big and small companies, which are in the e-commerce business or any form of business online, they managed to grasp and get onto this sort of journey together, which has been excellent. And we also, and it's not that this has been done before. I mean, Beckn Protocol as an idea itself was some sort of a moonshot. And it's not that Beckn Protocol have seen significant implementations or iterations before ONDC. We just got a mobility network started before that in July 2021, and we were still learning from that. And ONDC was therefore was also part of that early learning, adoption, this fine tuning and improvisation that we were going through. And we've learned a lot from the market interaction as to what works, what doesn't really work, what needs to be enhanced, and things like that. So at a pure specification and infrastructure level, ONDC has the whole experience with ONDC as a company and the participating networks have contributed a lot to make the Beckn protocol more robust. In fact, this January, on December 31st, we launched the new version of Beckn protocol with all the learnings coming from network like ONDC. So that's been sort of a journey where we have been kind of testing this idea on the market, seeing the various scenarios, and commerce being the way it is, extremely complex. We sometimes don't understand the post-order life cycle of commerce, where you have fulfillment, which is a very physical world, transfer of goods or services, cancellation, part cancellation, the whole grievance, redressal, and all that. And so therefore, it's been a fascinating year of learning and testing out what works and doesn't work. And today, for companies to come forward and do a beta in Bangalore and to kind of take that idea and educate it to the larger end user, which are the merchants like groceries and restaurants, which are the two domains we have largely picked up. And of course, the hyper local logistics also part of it. And then the end users to also experience. I think that's a journey we're going through, where now the effort is as much, while there's always an effort from ONDC to make it mainstream or make the adoption among the user population, not just the network participants, but the user population go up. It's also the network participants trying to find a way to sort of bring their users and customers. Some of them already have a legacy business, or some of them are just getting started with the model of ONDC. So that's a journey of awareness, adoption, user experience, design, making sure how this works, because it's a multi-party transaction. It's not everything happening on one platform. Now it's happening across the network. So those are the learnings we are going through. Now, what I foresee this happening is, once we streamline many of these transactions and sort of remove the natural friction that comes with an unbundled sort of a transaction. You're not just doing one transaction on one platform exclusively, you're spreading it out. Once we kind of streamline that and users and the developers intuitively understand this new model, and we solve for the experience and other things, I think that it will deepen the whole access to commerce thing. I think today, without ONDC, even today, I think the e-commerce penetration in India is barely about 7 or 8%. Which means that roughly about 45 million active shoppers online, or about 100 million, once in a year kind of shoppers, which is too small given where UPI is today and where the access to smartphones and internet is. I mean, we are a country of 900 million adults, 900 million internet connections, 600 million smartphones, and 250 to 300 million people actually doing UPI transactions. People are actually exchanging money. And for that kind of a sort of a landscape, just a 7% e-commerce penetration is something that we think that it's significantly under-penetrated. So how do we take it, deepen the access to e-commerce across segments of the customers and merchants and across the country, especially for small businesses who want to probably find it still difficult as a rite of passage to come online and do business online and continue to thrive, right? They still need some kind of an intermediary-led approach. So to overcome that, I see that happening in a big way. So 2023 could be a moment of that kind of a traction building up. How far will it go is a function of how the network participants develop their effort on bringing the merchants and customers together. but I see significant amount of adoption. I think moment we go through this initial learning phase, which I think probably will happen for another month or two, I see that sort of early traction takeoff happening. One is to saturate Bangalore and go beyond that across, which means that not just the existing network participants who are connected to ONDC or in the process of getting connected, but to get a wider set of smart tech entrepreneurs and all to build platforms very quickly with a lower cost of doing business now with on an infrastructure like ONDC and do that. This year we'll see an early traction on this journey, and I think we will see some good transaction across a few of the big and small cities when we unlock this whole easy interoperability that ONDC offers across the different networking platforms. Yeah.
Right. Oh, no, definitely, Sujit. Definitely makes sense. And I think one point that you spoke of, which makes a lot of sense, is that the not just ONDC but network participants who become a part as either a buyer application or a seller application, right? How they will unlock ONDC's growth with the help of their existing customers as well, right? Pivoting or pushing those customers to the ONDC to use the ONDC platform. Like for example, there would be, say for example, there's a ship rocket, right, which is currently integrating or working on the seller side of the stream, or there's a company called Seller App which is working on the seller side of things. And if you look at the buyer side, we have Paytm, or if we have Kotak, and we have a bunch of other players who are trying to build those kind of systems. So once they get built, like a Paytm's existing customer can go and use the ONDC platform, or a ShipRocket's existing, merchant can go and utilize the ONDC platform, and that is what I believe will unlock growth, right? It's a network effect, right? You unlock network after network after network by adding more and more nodes into the system, basically. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think 2023 is going to be a great year for the ONDC. Over to you.
Yeah, so I think what's going to happen is some of the existing players might have been doing e-commerce already before ONDC, and some of them have never done any kind of digital commerce on their platform, especially the name of some of the banks you've taken as an example. So I think one of the last mile sort of challenge, which though the buyer side network platforms, when you're talking about the consumer side, is to make their customers aware that you can actually do commerce on my platforms, and we'll do it through ONDC, but you don't have to go anywhere else with your existing logging and whatever you're doing. Let's say it's a banking app and you're doing largely banking services interaction. Suddenly you can see shopping, and it's not like you're going. The shopping tag means that you have a bunch of offers on some other platform, but you can actually go to the shopping tab and have a complete shopping experience. And you wouldn't want to so they can go and say that you don't have to use any other app. With this, you can pretty much get any kind of a grocery or a restaurant, and in future even the white goods and smartphones and all of that available at one place. So that's a bit of the last mile awareness. Once the apps, the existing and the future ones, get their whole infrastructure user experience worked out with whatever beta testing that they're all going through, I think that's the unlock you'll see. And I think the larger unlock would come from some of the big UPI apps, because they do have a lot of customers, and it's an everyday app. In some sense, you do use UPI in some way or the other every day. So suddenly, if I as a user were to get on any UPI app, it could be a BIM or a PhonePe or a Google Pay, I can suddenly say that, hey, I can actually do shopping here. And I can actually do I can do a ride booking, or I can buy grocery, or I can order food. That is a little bit of an awareness thing vector that I think companies will have to get into, the network participants on the buyer side. The second thing that they'll have to do is that how do they bring that whole user experience onto their app for a wider set of customers. Today, the user experience on any what I call the pre-ONDC monolithic model, where the buyer and seller are on the same platform, and the platform business actually is catering to an experience because they have control on both sides. Here, how do they bring that experience when they don't have a full control of the supply side as a consumer app, as a buyer app, because the supply could be an inventory of a seller on a different platform, and the logistics is on another platform. So you have a two platform cascading to fulfill that, offer an experience that the users can like and have patience on. So some of those are some of the area where they will probably do a lot of for product engineering, product management, user experience design, and all that. And once they solve for both, I think people will get onto this from the buyer side, and we'll have more customers searching for things on a wider array of catalogs that ONDC offers eventually, than going for an exclusive set of apps for one for each thing. Like for food, I use X app. For ride, I'll use a Y app. And then for shopping or something else like smartphones, I'll use another app, or for something else for apparels. How about just one app, one of your favorite banking or UPI or any app, or even a browser for that matter, and do all of that at one place? That that is a leap that I think both the buyer apps and the customers will have to take. And I think for that, it means that some of these experiences and all needs to be very carefully thought through and developed. And once that happens, I'm sure 2023 is an opportunity to get over this little fence and make that leap. Yeah.
Definitely, Sujit. Sujit, let's pick up on UPI. Okay. So there have been a lot of comparisons between ONDC and UPI, right? And some also predict that ONDC will be as monumental as UPI in the coming years. And similar to how UPI has transformed digital payments, ONDC will also, it is predicted, one day transform digital commerce. So, as per you, what will it take for ONDC to be as successful as UPI?
Yeah, that's a tall order getting compared to UPI in any sense for any new program, because I think what UPI has done is phenomenal, and it still gives me goosebumps the way it's scaling up. And I don't think anything can beat that, at least in terms of scale and numbers. But I think the key difference between UPI and ONDC is that that fundamentally the service or product is completely different, in the sense that we are actually looking at delivering goods and services. It's not just an exchange of money. Money is still somewhat a digital product when it comes to UPI kind of a transaction. Here,
Right.
protocol comes only till the point of giving information to the user on how to place an order, how to track your fulfillment. The actual fulfillment happens in the physical world of digital. I mean, the goods have to come from the warehouse and they have it delivered. The logistic guy has to know where to pick it up from. Either the logistic player could be from a different platform company altogether. So orchestration of all the on real world, the offline world experiences, competencies, and capabilities to offer a rich, fulfilling a UPI live experience is a lot of effort, and that's the challenge and the difference of what ONDC entails as compared to UPI. I'm nowhere saying that UPI is therefore easy, but I'm just saying that there is a new dimension of complexity with ONDC, and that's a larger market adoption. Perfecting the art of a fault-free or error-free fulfillment and all that. How do you cater to a very flexible, dynamic demand across the country? So those are some of the challenges that not just ONDC, but even the marketplace adopting ONDC will have to go through, which is very different from a very typical UPI transaction. The other thing about UPI transaction and ONDC is that ONDC probably is kind of taking this idea of a decentralized transaction to a whole new level, with almost like an absolute decentralization. There is no center to this transaction. There's no central switch or anything. It's just a peer-to-peer transaction between two platforms. So much so that even ONDC Limited does not get to know what the transactions are happening on the network. Given that kind of a peer-to-peer transactions, how do you manage therefore any disputes that comes out of transaction out of that transactions, or if the transactions get broken somewhere? How does payments, if somebody's collecting the money and the seller is on some other platform to whom the money has to be transferred to, how does that happen? There are different modalities in which the payment can happen, and all these elements are kind of again unique to the ONDC, sort of aggregated by the fact that it's fully decentralized. But I think decentralization is the core purpose of what ONDC exists, because that's the only way you're reducing the friction and what I call the unfreedom in the digital world when it comes to giving small businesses and everybody a chance to do business online. So how do you cater to those complexity? And ONDC that way in the last 1 year has been a fantastic journey of learning. And how do we actually build more building blocks on top of ONDC to solve for this in a way that probably is a little more trickier than I think money transfer transaction. And that's why I think the key difference is. So as much as it is a bit like, as many people call it as a metaphorically the UPI of commerce, it is a little bit more than that, given the whole physical world fulfillment challenges and the other elements that comes with a typical commerce transaction. Yeah.
Right. So I think what you said, right, that imagine if there was a UPI transaction, but there were actual physical notes, like which were being going from place A
Yeah,
to place B, right? Now,
that's
what
right.
if the
Yeah.
notes are counterfeit? What if the notes are counterfeit? Who owns that? Who has the onus of, managing that dispute? So those kinds of complexities, because there are no physical goods, are not applicable on a UPI transaction, because reconciliation is still happening between two bank accounts. It's still digital in nature, right? But here it is an actual physical goods delivery, or even a service delivery, like say for example, with the Kochi mobility network, right? Even a service delivery
Yep.
taking place, which has its own set of complications that arise, which the ONDC has to cater to. So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that when we sat down to think of, therefore, what should a protocol like Beckn do in that world? It's not
Right,
that we're discovering this much later. We kind of knew that if you're getting into the space, we have to recognize this complexity much earlier
right,
and sort of factor those into the design of the way protocol works. So, therefore, the protocol has to do a lot more of that of exception handling, managing for this additional complexity and things like that, like returns, part returns, single pickup, multi delivery, multi pickup, multi delivery, single click orders, all the fancy things that you see in
right,
e-commerce and that you see. How do we cater to all of that and make it resilient? So unless and until the design offers sort of these hooks for resilience, you can't build anything on top of it. It cannot be an afterthought or a patchwork of, oh, this thing is broken, so let's create something else, which is completely heterogeneous to the actual protocol and start thinking of something new. The architecture, the design principles has to fundamentally cater for this organically and then allow future evolutions to build for kind of just like this bunch of pigeonholes that you already have to think and put together as part of the protocol design, and then you're just putting your solutions in those pigeonholes so that it adds to that robustness. So that's one of the things, very intriguing things about the journey with the whole protocol design. But now is the time for putting that into place and having that done in a market and at a population scale. Yeah.
right. So Sujit, let's switch gears now and talk about the larger Beckn protocol. Okay. Besides
Right.
ONDC and the Kochi mobility network, what other exciting applications or projects can we see arising out of the protocol in the coming years? And what are some of the interesting use cases that haven't been explored yet?
Yeah, so fundamentally, if you look at the protocol itself, Beckn Protocol, although it started off with solving for a mobility problem and now it's getting into commerce and other things, I think the protocol fundamentally and generically is a is essentially a resource discovery and transaction protocol. It's kind of a universal resource discovery and a transaction protocol, which actually helps you to place an order lifecycle, even if the service is free, like at maybe a doctor in a primary healthcare offering teleconsultation. The whole idea of that order lifecycle against any resource is what the protocol generically sort of solves for. Now you can take that and do it for shopping, you can take that and do it for mobility, you can take that and do it for healthcare. But if you were to extend that, this idea to any new sort of a resource which are largely fragmented in an ecosystem that needs to be brought together to cater to a need, an intent of the consumer, then I think protocol naturally fits in for those kind of things. So therefore, what we are seeing, things that I can never imagine would be possible with backend. Of course, we are looking at concepts like how do we do energy as a resource, so EV charging, decentralized
Oh,
EV
okay,
charging as
okay.
a concept on protocol. We are looking at access to paralegal services, so that access to justice, kind of the friction that you have in how do you kind of decentralize and democratize that, so that just getting a legal opinion should not be so tough as it is today. I mean, I can just find any paralegal thing. So those are some of the other things that are happening. Skills is another thing that we are happening. Uh, so we are looking at we're kind of building a community of how skill and education service providers come together and create a decentralized open network, which is eventually can be part of ONDC or something else. But the idea is to think about the possibility of how skilling and learning could also be decentralized, where if you look at skilling as a resource, or a credential of a skilled resource as a resource itself, which should be discoverable. I am eligible for something. I have this credential of having passed an education, passed an exam, or having done this training, or having X years of experience. How do I beam it up on a network and others find me without having to be on the same platform as where the employer is on. So I think those are some of the things that I see. And what I also see is some of the adoption of the protocol on blockchains itself, other than the conventional
Okay.
web as a layer on top of HTTP. We are trying to see if we can actually, because protocol is technology agnostic, it's tech neutral. We have done some demo implementations of that on an open source blockchain called from Dive, but we are seeing a lot more traction on that. We are trying to see if Beckn can fit into an IoT to IoT kind of a transaction for an
Okay.
order lifecycle. Keeping it sort of
Okay.
light, and imagine tomorrow if your refrigerator can order for milk even before you wake up and open the refrigerator. So some of that
Right.
is the other possibilities. And yeah, and what probably excites me more is what if some of the combinations of this come together and offer experience. I mean,
Right.
the often quoted example by me is, if you're you booked a ride to go to the airport in Bangalore, and you know how much time it would take from whichever part of the city you're in, you can that buyer app can stitch an experience of having coffee delivered to an address which is your moving taxi from another company, and have it picked
Right.
up from any Starbucks or any favorite coffee shop on the way, and have a
Right.
delivery boy person maybe from Dunzo or a load runner come and pick it up and have it delivered. All you have to do is just drop the window and collect your coffee. So those kind of combinatorial innovation and bundling of services is something that I foresee coming with the adoption of Beckn. And those are the future use cases that I'm excited about. But obviously, I think what excites me more is the scale of this and not just the concept. These things only work if there is market traction. So I'm trying to see how we can take some of these ideas, get some smart entrepreneurs to build on this, and also enable a market where this can be done. And probably ONDC could be an avenue through which some of these services can get. I think an ONDC does have that aspirations to just go beyond this hyper local grocery and do a lot more. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I
Definitely.
don't know.
And I think,
Yeah.
no, go
Just,
ahead. Go
I don't
ahead.
know if I mentioned about teleconsultation, telehealth. This is an initiative that NHA, National Health Authority, is already doing as part of Ayushman Bharat Digital Health Mission, where you have UHI, Unified Health Interface, a bit like ONDC, but for healthcare services. So where you can do teleconsultation, booking and
Right.
accessing services of a testing lab, diagnostic lab, etc. So yeah, so that's the other use case that we are seeing some traction on. Yeah.
Right, 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 right. And I think what you spoke about, that bundling of services, right? I think ONDC just scratched that idea, the surface of that idea, basically with the first resource discovery and transaction happening between a buyer of a service or a good and the seller of a service of a good, and then the seller of of the good and the last mile delivery agent, basically,
That's
or
right.
logistic service, right? So that's just
Yeah,
the bundling is that's just scratching the surface. But like you said, parallel transactions taking place, or parallel goods and services being delivered, or that entire life cycle being broken down into various bits, and each of them being taken care of by the ONDC by different kinds of
that's right.
participants. That's honestly, the opportunities are truly endless here, right?
Yes, yeah, I think the fact that you have a somewhat universal resource discovery and transaction protocol. Um, um, I mean, it's kind of surprising that how we got here, and the fact that it started with mobility and we got here. But the fact that now this is available as a natural public good, it's like a new highway available. Question is, what kind of journeys and vehicles and that you can build on this highway, and that opens up for imagination. So I think it's more about that ability to imagine and achieve scale with that imagination, of course, with product fitment and all that. I think that's what I think it's unlocking, and it's unbelievable. I mean, I never thought that it will come this far and in this way, but yeah, it's fascinating.
Definitely,
Excuse
definitely.
me.
So Sujit, building on top of this, right? What are some of the interesting projects that FIDE or you are personally working on in the Beckn protocol space?
Yes, as a FIDE and as a team of 6, 7 people that we are, one of the primary focus for us uh, is to sort of see how the protocol sort of has its own evolution, and it grows continuously and it improves for wider adoption across the world, across sectors, across communities. and solve for these many unfreedoms that I call. Today, for example, how do we solve for, let's say, a driver or a seller who's been on one platform and building his or her credentials of rating and number of rides or number of orders and things like that, and suddenly decides to move to another platform. Does he have to still start from scratch, or can he port his data and continue to build from there? How do you build that kind of an interoperability to sort of solve for this little unfreedom of losing out on your own assets, which is your data as a information assets or collateral for that matter, and use that to continue to flourish with that business, or probably even access credit and bunch of things. So one is that. So how do we make the protocol naturally continuously develop and evolve to solve for several such unfreedoms that exist in a digital economy? So to do that, the route we want to take is to not put FIDE at the center and say we will be the ones designing and contributing to evolution, but to build a wider community. And we're calling this wider community, which is already there, as Beckn Open Collective. So one of the sort of the primary objectives of what I do at FIDE is to sort of help Beckn Open Collective continue to grow and thrive across disciplines, across regions, so that there is an active community of volunteers, whether it could be individuals or entrepreneurs or even all institutions, academia, all contributing to this idea, if this idea makes sense, rather than having one protocol exclusive one thing, another protocol for another thing. Here's one universal protocol on which you can build further. There are things you may not like in it, so how do we change that? How do we make it better? So that kind of a sustainable community-led model for evolution of Beckn, including the governance of the protocols. Even today, Beckn is community governed. There is a governance model for how the decisions are taken on evolution of the protocol and all that. That has to be, I think we're seeing if we can have a wider representation of all that. So that's kind of the one of the core kind of a plan agenda that I have as FIDE. The other thing that we want to do is to make this imagination, kind of give this nudge or prime the pump, as we say it, on imagination side. Like the examples that I gave you on the various possibilities, how do we make individuals, young entrepreneurs, students coming out of colleges, or big organizations and things like that, including some established ones, to reimagine how do we do things if there is a protocol like this available, now that we are in that world where a protocol is available, whether it's Industry 4.0, IoT, edge computing based innovations. How do you bring autonomy of mobility on top of Beckn Protocol, or energy as a service, as I said? How do you kind of get them to think about? So we will be doing a few hackathons this year and in the coming years, where we want to sort of throw these challenge statements and think, hey, can you imagine this with or around Beckn Protocol? So that's some of the things to kind of drive some imagination and make people more attracted to do this and eventually follow the community. The other thing is, of course, to see that is this only relevant in a context of India, or acts as a protocol? Does it fit into every region and across the world? Some of my journeys outside of India with the idea of Beckn Protocol has been very encouraging in terms of the feedback. People are saying that this was required yesterday, and I'm glad that it's actually happening today. And so hoping that we will have entrepreneurs, communities adopting some of this or some form of Beckn Protocol for solving their needs in their markets, in their countries, whether it's in Africa, Europe, America. It looks like the protocol is relevant across markets, whether it's developing or emerging or the developed ones. And that's something that I think one of the other things that I think FIDE as a company would be focusing on.
Right. Makes perfect sense, Sujith. Sujith, this entire episode has been an absolute masterclass on the ONDC protocol, on the Beckn protocol, and thank you so much for this. I have one last question for you. All right, and this is something we ask every Indianaut who comes onto our platform: is that what advice do you have for other aspiring entrepreneurs or Indianauts or people who want to build on the Beckn space?
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Gautam, for this fascinating conversation interaction. Love the questions, and I'm glad that I could be here and throw a bit more light on what many people already know or learning to know about the protocol Beckn itself and ONDC. Now, if I were to step back and look at my own sort of journey so far, and then respond to the question, which is always the difficult question, the most difficult question to kind of offer an advice. But if I were to think about it, I think clearly, I think somewhere India has a very, very and India is, I think, we are at a very critical juncture, in terms of how our evolution as a country, both for innovation, market development, economic access, social good, and all that. Till now, so I think if you look at a few years ago, India was the corridor for all the problems to go through. I mean, every problem in the world is a problem in India. India doesn't
Right.
escape any of the global problems. So, but now it has also become the opportunity corridor. So we have
Right.
the problems to solve for and also the opportunities available to solve for. So I don't think there's a
Right.
better moment for somebody who wants to solve a problem and problem at scale, and the opportunities available to jump on, especially with the access to digital public goods, which is reducing the cost of doing business, acquiring orders, and things like that. I think there's no better moment. So I think we should seize on that and take India as your sort of a primary area where you want to focus on building your innovations and build a sustainable business. And in that journey, and I think it is possible that you can solve for a big problem, or take on a big problem, but at the same time, not overdo the solutioning of it. Because the problem is big, so should be the solution. I think India has been demonstrating that with a very minimal take solution infrastructure like UPI is just a lightweight specification protocol. With those being there and available, can you also think of solutions which can achieve scale, but at the same time keep it simple and solve one particular set of a problem? And that itself is an entrepreneurial opportunity available. Of course, it takes time to discover such a thing, such a solution, or identify that finer aspect. But I think there is enough opportunities to hack out, get to that point by trying multiple things and get there and pick that one small thing rather than doing too many things. And that focus can probably is a way I would looking at shaping the entrepreneur journey as I go forward. 4 years of just putting in solving for different things, and maybe one final great idea that comes out of it, and build that for scale. And it's great. I mean, for me, it's like, in a way, it's like pandemic itself, COVID as an example. I mean, the whole world got logged in with a virus that was just a single strand DNA. All it needed is a irresistible medium,
Right.
which is essentially people breathing. Only if people stop breathing, there would not be pandemic. But the fact that it's so irresistible, it won't happen. So I think solutions also can be that minimal in terms of problem solving for scale. But to get to that is a journey. But I think there are enough opportunities and problems to go through to get there. And that's the fascinating sort of times we live in. And we would like to wish every entrepreneur good luck in that journey and make it happen.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sujith, for joining us today. We wish you and FIDE the very best for the future.
Thank you so much, Gautam. This has been a lovely conversation. Yeah, and I
Thank
look
you.
forward to seeing what others talk about and mention, or any questions that they may have on this. And yeah, look forward to this getting published. Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. And I believe, and this is just a shout out to everyone that, FIDE has been actively organizing, as well as, organizing and contributing to the ecosystem with various hackathons or skillathons. So I do recommend everyone to go and check out FIDE on their website and various other platforms, just to learn more about these kind of events that are taking place, to learn more about the Beckn Protocol itself and its applications, and the exciting use cases that arise out of it.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this episode. The Indianaut podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to receive all updates on the upcoming episodes. We'll see you in the next one.